This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole, aka your girl's favorite lesbian, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast, our stories on our own terms. What I want to do today is actually talk with really a couple of guests about queerness and visibility is the broadest way to explain it. I have Sharmane and Jessica with me today. Sharmane is actually my producer, so I'll let her kind of give a little bit more info about that. And I won't reveal who Jessica is. I'll let her say who she is for herself. But just, I guess, a little bit of background for me in terms of this particular topic, and I guess why it's something that I'm interested in and why it's important to me. Of course, since I have Black Radical Queer, I mean, those are identities that are a part of me. And so in terms of my queerness, I mean, I do identify, among other things, I identify as lesbian as well as poly. But I'm also primarily, not exclusively, but primarily femme presenting. So there are some things that come along with that I know that both Sharmane and Jessica can relate to. And so we're going to be really talking about that and then talking about that in some ways that are more specific to them as well. I'll let Sharmane start and go ahead and, give you some information about who she is, and then Jessica can do the same.
So I am Sharmane. I am the owner-operator of ManeHustle Media, the podcast network for POC content. I'm also the host of Militantly Mixed, which is a podcast about race and identity issues from the mixed race perspective. I describe myself as just your average Black, Japanese, Irish, English, German, Black, Seminole, Native American, Spanish, and Creole, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist woman. That's sort of everything that I kind of consider my identity. I am married to a man, and we have shared female partners in the past, both in triads and just, for fun. And then we also date separately from time to time. My friendship with Javia started through a poly platform. We met online in kind of a forum type discussion thing, and we realized we had a lot in common, became friends, and now we're partners in the podcast world.
That was a more than a mouthful to describe, but I like that. I like that you have kind of like this rundown of okay, here are all the things, and I'm sure there's more, but it's kind of like here's my go-to laundry list of identity stuff.
As I've gotten a little bit older, those were the types of things that I could kind of, as I started to nail down who I was, it started to become a laundry list. And so now that's how I describe myself right now.
Yeah, I think too, it's important because intersectionality is very real. I mean, we are not just one thing, we're nuanced, and we have all these concurrent, I guess is the word, identities that we have to navigate at the same, we have to navigate simultaneously. So I think it's good to put that out there because it gives more of an idea of what our context is, our individual context. So I'll let Jessica share her context and her own laundry list before we kind of launch into this conversation.
I'm Jessica, and thank you, Javia, for having me. I identify as a lot of things, but I am queer and bisexual and femme presenting. And I, in my polyamorous life, have a wonderful husband and a wonderful female partner that I consider my life partners. I have a pretty mixed background. I'm German, I'm Black, I've got a little bit of Senegalese thrown in there, a lot of Native American. So I am a woman of color, but I identify as a Black woman. And my focus and my passion has always been mental health. So I spent a lot of time as a therapist working with people of color in the last few years, especially people in the queer community. And I'm just so happy to be here and to talk about these things because they've been things that have always been on my mind, but I really haven't had until recently a space to discuss them in.
All right. So I wanted for folks to be able to have kind of that backdrop of what your individual context is, as we kind of get into this conversation. So I will, I guess, kind of just give a little bit more information from my perspective, and then we'll just branch out from there in regards to visibility. Like I mentioned, I am primarily femme presenting. So I, came out probably around when I was maybe 14 years old. I mean, I recognized before then that I like had attraction to, at the time, girls, because I was a girl, I wasn't grown, but attraction to girls. But at the time, I mean, I didn't have any kind of conceptualization of what gay was, what queer was, what lesbian was, what homosexual, like none of those things. I just knew that, I mean, when I would play with other kids, like I'm like, okay, I'll play with boys and girls, but I just felt different when it came to girls. I had crushes on girls. I had like my first kiss and all that kind of stuff was girls. And there was like nothing abnormal or anything like that to me. I just was like, this is just kind of is what it is. And then as I got older and, my worldview expanded and I had more of a broader understanding of kind of how the world worked, that's when I started to understand that, oh, this actually isn't really looked at in a good way. Like this is abnormal. So because prior to that, I didn't feel the need to come out. I didn't know coming out was a thing. I just knew who I was. Like I knew that, oh, I have a crush on this girl in my class or something. But beyond that, I honestly did not think of it any greater than that. Once I understood like, oh, this is something deviant, that I'm different in this way, then I was like, oh man, I really need to, once I figured out like what coming out was and all this other kind of stuff, I came out. And when I came out, I actually was kind of like in between, like my presentation, my gender presentation, I guess you can say, or gender expression was pretty in the middle. Like sometimes I was more masculine presenting and sometimes I was more femme presenting. And it went back and forth. And really a lot of times it's more heavily leaning toward the masculine side. And so I recognized like the attention and stuff that I got in that presentation. And so it was, I was approached more by girls and all that kind of stuff when I presented that way. However, when my presentation was more girly, it's not like I ceased to like girls, but I definitely was not approached as much, if at all. But I also recognized like I didn't have a way, there was no marker. Because, that masculine presentation was like a marker for something. That didn't mean that every masculine presenting girl was like, queer, but that was still a marker for the possibility versus with femme presentation, there's the assumed straightness because like, how could you be any other way? So I just really like noticed the difference. And it was also just hard for me kind of like identifying other queer femme women, even though I was like definitely attracted to femme women. I'm just like, I don't know, if she, has that interest and I'm assuming, definitely they felt the same way. So there was kind of that just not knowing, in addition to the assumption that assumed heterosexuality just from the outside world. Like if this is your presentation, then obviously clearly you're straight, versus if you have like a masculine presentation, even if you are straight, it's like, oh no, like clearly you something's a little, different or whatever about you. So that's when I really started to understand that like this presentation were markers for things. Like that masculine presentation was a marker for something and an identifier. In my femme presentation, there was an erasure or an invisibility that came along with it in relation to my queerness. It was like, oh, well, I guess I'm less queer because of who I am. And so for a while, I rejected the femme label. It wasn't until like really my adulthood that I embraced it. Like now I will say I am femme, but I wouldn't say that because I felt like it limited me in my queerness. So that's kind of like my, I guess, issue. So that was always the thing. Like I've always been, I'm attracted to a spectrum of women. So masculine presenting, femme presenting, versatile, like, switch it up every day of the week. I don't care. It's just, if I'm attracted to you, I'm attracted to you. It like that, the presentation doesn't dictate it. I'm not more attracted to a specific presentation. I'm just like, no, give me all the options. Like I'm here for it all. So yeah, but it definitely, how you're identified and like how visible or invisible you are definitely is marked kind of by that presentation. So I wonder, just kind of in you all, as you kind of came into your queer identity, was your presentation always the same? Did you notice like that there was any type of like a lack of visibility? Did you feel like, oh, well, I'm seen as less queer because I'm femme? Like, that kind of thing of assumed heterosexuality, because that was always the thing. It's like the default. Straight is the default. So it's like, oh yeah, clearly you're straight.
Right. Yeah. For me, like I've always been consistent in terms of my presentation. I never really officially came out as bisexual. I just spoke from that perspective and people kind of figured it out. I did sort of hide it from my family just because of the complications of family and on the Japanese side, which is the side of the family I was living with at the time that I started to come into my realization of my bisexuality. So I would say that I never liked the term femme. But I knew I wasn't masculine presenting. I'm not girly by any stretch of the imagination, but I can dress up if I have to. It just feels like drag when I do. So for me, the coming out portion of it was my very first girl crush I was 14. I didn't understand that was like a sexual or romantic crush, even as I was fantasizing about her. She was just a girl I went to high school with. In fact, I don't even know her name. I can still picture her. She was sort of a Afro-Latina look, and she had curly hair that was wild, and that was just everything that I thought was attractive at the time. I thought actually that it was what I wanted to be. I wasn't making the connection that I was actually attracted to her, because I understood gayness. I didn't understand lesbians were a thing. I grew up around like hair shows. My mom was a hairstylist, so I grew up around hair shows and gay guys all over the place and drag queens. I understood that men could be gay. I did not understand that women could be gay until I was, getting up there a little bit in my teenage years. So my first crush, I see this girl. I think she's amazingly beautiful. And because I had my own mixed race identity issues of sort of being black but presenting ambiguously Asian, Latin, I thought when I saw her, I wanted to be her. But I would have sex dreams about her, and it didn't make sense to me.
That makes things a little complicated.
Yeah, like I was already sexually active with men or boys, I guess, but I didn't understand. I didn't get it. And then as I got further into high school, people started to accuse me, and I say accuse on purpose, of being bisexual.
Oh my gosh. That happened to me too. Somebody told me. Somebody was like, Flavia, you're gay. And I'm like, you should. Okay.
Like, I'm not really. So yeah, it's that type of thing. It's like I actually had a reputation, which I don't even know how, because at the time I wasn't fucking anybody, but I had the reputation of being a bisexual sadomasochist. And I'm like, do we even understand what that is?
Wait, hold on.
A lot of labels in high school.
That escalates
pretty serious.
Right? And
like,
I'm thinking, we're 15, 16.
Like,
what do we know about this? Like, you know.
It's just like, first of all, it's like, why? It's like, what is going on in their lives that they even had that to add to the mix?
You know
that's high school.
It's like, you know what? We think that this is a part too. Like, I mean, I definitely had a person who told me, oh, like you're gay. And before I knew what kind of gay was or lesbian was, and she was like, yeah, you're gay. And I was like, I didn't deny it. I was just like, I had honestly never considered it. I just was like,
I mean,
okay.
in terms of when I was coming up in the 80s and 90s, lesbian visibility was pretty small in comparison to what it is now, I think. So if you are a girl trying to figure out why you are fantasizing about other women, and at that time, and you're not seeing it in TV or representation at all, even Pride was so limited, I think, at the time. I remember Pride seeming like a gay male festival. Yeah. And it's like women were invisible unless they were men in drag. And then in that case, women were glorious. But we always understood that glorious woman had a penis. And since trans wasn't being very talked about at the time or whatever, I just thought I was weird, but I was okay because I felt like I'm weird anyway. I'm a yellow looking girl who identifies as black. I got that I was weird. It took really until about 16, 17 until I started saying, oh, no, I want to fuck women. Like, I want this. I just didn't know how to tell anybody.
I want to be her. I want to be with her in the biblical sense.
I had a friend, too, that I became close to. And it's funny because in high school, I started to figure out she was gay. She didn't know. But I was still dealing with trying to figure out what I was. And I had the hots for her, but I didn't get it. We were such close friends. I was like, no, it's like a friend crush, Now, fast forward all these years later, I'm no longer attracted to her. We're still friends, but I'm no longer attracted to her. But I'm mad that she didn't figure out she was gay until later, because we could have been fucking all through high school and it would have been awesome. but by the time she figured it out, we had already moved on in terms of
You're like, well, if you had figured that out in time,
right? I've had this talk to her too. I'm like, man, if you had just listened to me, because I kind of said it to her once. I think I was 17 or so, and I was like, do you like girls? And she's like, yeah, girls are all right, whatever and stuff. And then I realized she didn't get what I was saying, and she kept picking these effeminate boyfriends, and I was like, these dudes aren't dudes, when you're talking in like 1990s context of gender, right? I'm like, these dudes you're picking aren't dudes. They're soft, they're emotional, they're delicate. You don't want to have sex with them. So I'm thinking maybe you need to explore something. But here I am giving advice to somebody about what they're going through while not really dealing with what I was going through. And it really took until I was about 18, 19 before I was like, I get it now. I'm ready to start looking for a female partner. And by the time I actually got a chance to have sex with a woman for the first time, I was 21, and I was just like, she was ugly. I wasn't very attracted to her, but we hung out for a class, and I was like, yeah, you'll do. I just need to get this out of my I just need to get one off.
My God. Not you'll do. Oh, Lord.
So I actually entered into my very first female relationship was as a third to a couple, because I was so desperate to fuck a girl. I was willing to take the couple as a whole just to get that chance, because it was the first thing that had become
that's a whole other
topic. But it is what helped me finally understand, I am properly bisexual. I evenly find women attractive, although I tend to prefer men in relationships, and women I probably sexualize more than men in general. I would say I would say that's right.
All right. So, Jessica, I guess it's your turn to to add on.
So for me, my experience was a little bit different. I knew as soon as I started, I guess, conceptualizing as a child, attraction and like the way that kids think about it. My Barbies always had girlfriends. Ken was like kind of on the side, and
Ken was on the side. Oh.
Ken was.
I totally disregarded
watching
Ken.
or something.
Like, I never had a Ken. Look, I had like Barbies, like that I rarely played with, but Ken was just like not a presence. I was like,
people gave me Kens, but yeah. So just in my play, it just kind of naturally fell into place that way, and I never really thought about it. I had kind of an interesting childhood. I grew up bouncing around a lot. I had a single parent, and my family's very blended. I had a Latina, and a white stepmother. My mom is biracial, and she's also she's German and she's Black. So I had a lot of different cultures around me, and a lot of different concepts and perceptions of sexual orientation, race. It was just like a nice, chaotic situation all the time in my home. So I didn't have a lot of like clear-cut opinions around me about what was the right thing, because there were a lot of other things going on in my childhood. So I think around 5th grade, I figured out I had my first girl crush, and which was kind of rare and awesome. We liked each other. We didn't ever verbalize that, but when we hung out, it was definitely in a romantic way. Like she was my girlfriend. I have never really officially come out. And at that point, especially in 5th grade, I wasn't even thinking about coming out. But I do remember that was the first time I also learned that it was wrong. We hung out a lot, and she was my first kiss. And I remember we were at school, and I think people started to figure out that maybe our relationship wasn't just friends. And people started to make fun of me. And that's when I realized there was something wrong with liking girls. And from then on,
how did they figure it out? Like you said that it wasn't really like verbalized, but it was romantic. So how in 5th grade world, like how did that manifest?
I'm still trying to figure that out myself. But my assumption is that the way that we engaged as kids, just kind of like kids who are straight, have their little girlfriend-boyfriend relationships, something wasn't fitting with the way we were interacting to the rest of our classmates. Something felt off. And I don't even know what prompted someone to suggest that, kind of like Sharmane with the sadomasochist thing. I feel like in 5th grade, it was interesting to me that became an accusation that people caught on to and then bullied us. But it was difficult, and I wasn't devastated by it, but I did learn very quickly, this is not okay to share. So kind of for the
Right.
remainder of my school days, I had a lot of friends. Actually, my first boyfriend in middle school ended up coming out as gay later. And I was in the South during all this. I was in Georgia. So, some interesting perceptions happen here. But I remember a lot of my friends coming out and losing friends, being made fun of, being beat up in school, in middle school and high school. Even with my sixth grade boyfriend, when he came out in high school, people accused me of turning him gay. Just a lot of negativity. And I decided because of that to stay closeted.
But it's so interesting to me though, because, of kind of like having this, of course, like very natural attraction kind of thing. Because of course, when I was like growing up, like you play house, you play doctor, all that kind of stuff. It was always like me as a little girl and little girls. I didn't think anything of it. So growing up, I always had that like my crushes and all that kind of thing were always on girls. Not like it was never boys, but it was just predominantly, it was like overwhelmingly girls. And I didn't think anything of it until it became a situation of somebody saying something was wrong, of it being pointed out as like a bad thing, you know what I mean? Because before then, I'm like, this is just how I feel. I didn't even think about it like, oh, everybody, like all the other girls like boys and I like girls. No, it was just like, I had no concept of that at all. It was just that it just was what it was until it was a problem, like until someone pointed out that like, oh, ew, that's nasty, or that's not, how it's supposed to be, or those kind of things. And I was a tomboy. So, it was like, oh, you look like a little boy and all that kind of stuff. So it was when it became less like, because at a certain point you're expected to, it's like, okay, that tomboy stuff and like playing in the dirt and blah, blah, that's all cool and fine. Now, like you're at like puberty age and stuff, that ain't cute no more. You're supposed to be girly. So it was like that, me just being like tomboyish, because I was never a girly girl. I was always, even no matter what my presentation was, I was always tomboyish. But it was like that, like, oh, you're not performing femininity correctly, on top of, oh, there's this, this attraction that you have is not okay, or like, oh, you seem to, like girls or whatever, even though I didn't know, what gay was. So it's like, it's just interesting to me that that's when it comes up, is that, oh, this is a bad thing. Like you're just living your little happy Black queer young life, and then somebody's like, oh, you and this little girl have this weird, you know what I mean? Like that's just so crazy.
But also, did you feel that you could hide it a little because little girls could hold hands and play and stuff like that? I mean, I'm surprised, Jessica, for you that yours at fifth grade you're getting that kind of weirdness.
Right.
I felt like I remember holding my little friend's hands for a long time, and it just being like that's what girls did, and I think
it's like girls can definitely be more
confusion,
intimate, But I mean, but for me, because I was tomboyish, no. It was like that's what made it. But
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just saying, like, for me, since I was tomboyish, then that added that other element to it, where it's like, if I was girly, then that's kind of, I guess it could be ignored a little bit longer, but not this little rough girl. Like, it's like, oh no, like she is acting like a little boy, and she is kind of having these type of friendships with little girls type of thing.
I feel like the reason that it was so noticed was the context of where I was living. I lived in Decatur, city of Decatur at the time in Georgia, which is pretty liberal because there is a women's college in city of Decatur. There was a lot of professors. And I do know that one of my friends in fifth grade, he had two moms. There was a lesbian couple that had children in our neighborhood. So a lot of us in our little fifth grade community were aware, I think more so than a lot of fifth graders might have been, about certain things because we had some pretty liberal thinking parents. That doesn't mean that their perceptions of things were kind, but kids knew more than I think most children would know at that age. So they picked up on it, especially because we had a kid in our class with moms who identified as lesbian. So I think that, I don't know if it started with him or it was just because a lot of us knew his parents, that's where it stemmed from. And it just became very hostile. So like I was saying, like high school, middle school, school, I kind of kept it. I was certainly attracted to some different girls throughout then, but I only dated boys. And I remember the only person that I ever knew who was bisexual when I was a child came out at my high school and had the same experience. She was actually really fetishized afterwards, and she was harassed a lot by the other boys. She was younger than me. She was a sophomore and I was a junior at the time. And that scared me too, because I had a few other incidents in high school where people had accused me of being gay, and I dealt with a lot of racial issues too. Being a mixed Black girl, people feeling like I wasn't Black enough. So I was really just trying to stay under the radar and not be a part of all of the drama in my high school. So I didn't really start to try to come out to people until college. And being femme presenting, I really struggled with, one, feeling like I was kind of stifled throughout that age where you start dating and like fantasizing and want to hook up with people. I really wanted to be with women, but I didn't know how to safely do that because of the area I grew up in and the things I had seen. I didn't feel comfortable coming out. And I didn't think it was fair that I had to come out. I've always had the thought that like straight people don't come out. Why do I have to announce myself?
Yeah.
But that conflicts with the fact that, well, I'm femme presenting. So if I don't announce myself, how will people know I like them without me having to throw myself out there and get rejected by a straight woman? So I spent a lot of time just very, I'll say angsty, that I just, was in college and really was ready to come out. Tried to a few times to some people. They didn't believe me, which was really hard.
That's erasure right there.
And there was actually story time. I was at a gay club and I was like, I was on a trip for a research team I was on, and we were at a gay club. And not everybody who went with us, I don't know how they all identified, but I had mentioned that I wasn't straight, and they laughed at me and they were like, yeah, right. And it was just like those type of incidents. It's like, what do you say to prove yourself to people?
And you definitely shouldn't have to. Like, how is somebody else going to tell you your own identity? Like, if you're like, I identify this way, and you're like, nah, what?
Right. So like, that's cute.
And that's where the fetishizing, I think, comes in, because then it's like, prove it, kiss this girl in front of us or something like that. And you're just like, why do I have to do any of this? I think that's why I made an effort to not come out.
So why is it such a hard thing to conceptualize, though? Is because of that erasure. Like, there's no way, like, look at you, there's no way that you could be. But that's so ridiculous. But it's just classic erasure. Like, oh, no, obviously, clearly, you're straight. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Like, straight people don't believe you. The gay women don't believe you, or they have which is a whole different topic. They have an issue with bisexual women. So
I do that.
It just,
Lord.
It got to a point where I really wanted. It is like there's so much that comes with it, and I just ended up dating a lot of men. And I'll say that I always make a joke that I'm like 99% lesbian. So it just felt very isolating from a dating perspective and romance, but also from a social perspective. When things like Pulse happened, I really wanted to be a part of, like, just be a part. And a lot of people see me, especially now that I'm married to a man, as a straight woman. And I don't want to insert myself and feel like it's inappropriate because I'm trying to be like, I'm queer too, because I don't feel like it's appropriate in that context. But it's hard. It's hard in all aspects of my life to feel like I have to announce myself to be myself. That's been my biggest struggle with my bisexuality is because I'm femme presenting. I feel like if I'm attracted to someone or I just want to share a part of me, I have to be like, hi, my name is Jessica and I'm a bisexual. I can't just
and everybody's like, hi, Jessica.
Exactly.
Right.
No, I feel the same way.
Since my last encounter.
Right. I feel the same way because in my case, I had a huge gap between the last relationship I had with a woman to the next relationship I had with a woman. And then on top of it, being married to a man during that time, it's like, well, you've either given up your bisexuality because you've now married to a man. And so,
narrative.
So in that case, I had to come out as poly for sure, but I never really came out as bisexual. Like now I just talk about it. So it's just like, that's just, you figure it out. But I never had that moment that sit down and be like, here world, this is what I am. I did have it for the poly thing. But what I hated was that because the type of women I'm attracted to are, on the femme side, then it was like, well, then you're not really gay because gay women are masculine. Like, well, no, that's a type. The thing that bothers me.
That's like it takes that's patriarchy because it takes masculinity to validate things.
Right.
There
Which
has to be some type of male energy.
Right, exactly. So they're like, if masculinity is not involved in some capacity, then it's less valid. And that contributes to the erasure too, because it's like, let's say if Jessica and I are like walking down the street or something, and we can, or even, like with my wife, we can be out and about, and the way that people perceive us, like they'll be like, oh, that must be your sister. Now, you both, no, my wife, we don't look anything alike, okay? We're both black. Like, we don't look anything alike. But it's like this whole idea of like, oh, there's no way that you all could be involved with each other in this capacity. Oh, that must be your sister. Oh, that must be your cousin. Like, no, that is my whole wife. Like, are you kidding me?
I mean,
and who notices that anyways? They don't
right,
get
and I don't
colorism.
Exactly.
There's
but I don't
so
think
much loaded in there.
Right. But we don't present, like, when we interact with each other, I'm like, okay, clearly this is not my relative in that capacity. Like, I'm not interacting with my sister this way. I'm not interacting with my cousin this way. Like,
right.
Are you kidding? So yeah, it's that whole thing about, it's less valid or whatever. Like, it's just an automatic, like, oh, you must be, anything but romantically involved. So there's that assumption too.
For me, the thing that I find frustrating is because I think of myself as sort of masculine mentality, although not masculine. I also think of myself as a dominant personality, although not a dom. I tend to be attracted to feminine female and masculine male. So like for me, I have like a sort of a gender coding way of attraction. Like it doesn't matter if the person is trans or cis. If they're a man, they have to appear and seem and behave as a man. And if they're a woman, they have to appear and seem and behave as a woman, regardless of whether they're cis or trans. That part doesn't impact me. But because I look femme, but I'm not girly. I think sort of masculinely. So I guess I don't want to say I play that role, but when I'm in a relationship with a woman, I do think of myself in terms of what would be assigned to masculinity, the opening of the doors, the paying for the food, the things that would be gendered towards male, even though I'm not. So I feel like even more so I'm this weird thing, even within the bisexual world, in that I don't really switch between a femme behavior or masculine behavior. I just am this way. Right. I'm not so masculine that I'm a tomboy. Like, you would never guess that I was a tomboy or anything like that from interacting with me, because I'm not. But I'm just not girly. Yeah, but I like girls that are. So right. So I get this weird thing.
Me and Jessica actually had a conversation about that, though, because I was telling her, because that's me. Like, I'm not, even though sometimes I am definitely like masculine presenting. So I kind of run a little bit more of the spectrum with my presentation, but my mentality is very similar. Like, I'm not girly. Even no matter what my presentation is, I can be what I call high femme. It's like, if I have to dress it up and do the pinup girl thing, I can absolutely do that. It's not a problem. But that's who I am as a person. Like, I'm not, my personality and all that, my demeanor is not girly girl. But Jessica and I were talking about that because I do tend to, I'm dominant. So I do kind of fall into that role. But then it has been interesting because then I get boxed in, which was like a lot of my experience with femme women was like being boxed into that masculine role. And I called it like a pseudo male. Like I said, I was like treated like the pseudo boyfriend, where I'm like, okay, well, I am still a woman. I'm not trying to be like a man or anything like that. So I don't want to be treated like some kind of like pseudo hyper masculine, type of thing, just kind of boxed in and left there. Interesting to me, but I do tend to play that role when I engage with femme women. I won't just say femme women, mostly femme women, but from my experience, most of the partners that I've had, because I've had a pretty even amount of like femme and masculine presenting partners, but my masculine presenting partners, not in entirety, but like when I look at the numbers overall, have been more kind of like accommodating of my nuance. And my wife is like, girl, whatever, however you wrap it up talking about, I don't care. Like, I'm a rock with you if we both out here looking real masculine. If you're looking real femme, I don't care. I'm all for it. But when I've had femme partners, for the most part, they wanted me to kind of like stay in that kind of more masculine box, and not be super like, even with my presentation, kind of like, okay, don't kind of get too far over here into like the girly girl. Even like if I'm gonna appear that way, like with the just my attire and makeup and all kind of stuff, they're like, that's my lane. You know, you kind of stay more so in that middle ground or that like more masculine side of things.
And that just makes me think about like the policing we do to ourselves. Yeah. And I mean, different strokes for different folks. I get it. You know, some people want that, but you can't place that on your partner. And I feel like we have adopted in the queer community a lot of the same problems that we're faced with outside of ourselves. Because to tell your partner, oh, you're getting too much into this lane, well, that's who they are. So you don't, just like straight people don't get to police us, they don't get to police you for deciding to look a certain, you know, you want to wear a dress, you can wear a dress or.
But it's a binary, you know, so it's still, even in queer relationships, like there's still a lot of adhering to that binary. And it's like, it's one thing if that's what you agreed to, because some folks that does absolutely work, that, you know, that kind of more binary thing, but that's not the case for everybody. But it's like, in my situation, it's just people trying to kind of like push me into that binary. And sometimes I do fit it. Like sometimes I do fit the binary, but that's not my entirety. So that's when it became an issue, when it was like, okay, I know that, you know, I know that kind of like you enjoy engaging with me when I'm looking more boyish or when I'm more tomboy, even if I'm like just like jeans and a t-shirt or a basketball short, like if it's, you know, kind of in the middle, I'm boyish. And then there seems to be this discomfort if I'm like looking more feminine. I mean, it may appear to be more girly. I'm still my regular, not girly self because I'm just not girly, but the presentation. So that's just interesting to me because that's something that Jessica and I had talked about before, just like so there is kind of like that the issue of visibility and erasure externally and internally. So externally, you're both women. You're dismissed. Like, you know, there's no way that this could be anything valid or meaningful unless there is some type of, even if a partner is masculine. I mean, my wife is masculine of center, but even that, it's like, you're still both women. Like that gives it a little bit more validity, but barely, you know, it's nothing to like, you know, write home about. So that's that external. And then internally, it's like, oh, well, you know, we have to fit into like this binary type of thing, or like you have to stay in this lane for me to feel, and I don't know, I guess for them, it was more so, I feel like, well, depending on the person, like I know like one person in particular just felt kind of like threatened, like her femininity was threatened by me. It was just a lot. I'm just like, okay, this is a lot of baggage. that I
so she's carrying a lot.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
My ex was what I refer to as the high maintenance version of girly, but she could be my version too. And I don't know how to classify mine. I kind of look at it like this. Like if my ideal relationship style is a triad and I have my masculine husband and a feminine girlfriend or wife, however that ends up shaking out, I am the one that wears slacks and a nice shirt, like so I'm like kind of molding the two things together.
You're the happy medium.
Like I'm the happy medium. So I like to think of myself as sort of the center of that triangle, in that I'm mirroring both sides, because I'm not super masculine, I'm not super feminine, I'm somewhere in the middle.
Extreme.
And with the ex, like she could get herself all done up, and she would take 2-3 hours to get ready, and that's when I start to get like, oh man, I wish I was with someone more like me, because the exhaustion of that high maintenance-ness. But then when she could go days of just being regular, t-shirts and jeans and just being whatever, then it was like, oh, okay, this is comfortable. This is cool. So I guess I'm probably sort of attracted to someone more similar to me in that sort of behavior. Although I like when they dress up and look nice and all that kind of stuff and present. I just don't want to have to go through it myself. I feel like I'm in drag every time I put makeup on, which I don't wear very often. And luckily my husband is he is a feminist and he's a philosopher and things like that, and he doesn't expect or want traditional gender roles, although he's not effeminate in any way, and he doesn't want to I would say maybe be accused of that in any way, but he's gentler in ways that the typical masculine male is. He's more open to it. Mm-hmm. If I wear makeup, he looks at me like, but that's not really you. So like I appreciate having that male partner that one does not fetishize my bisexuality. I mean, like any man or maybe people like us, he's open to group sex and things like that. He's enjoys it and appreciates it, but it's not the reason why we're in this poly type of relationship, and it's not the reason why we even want a triad. We really, I mean, it's mostly for the balance of the household. We don't have, we have particular roles that we play, and what we don't have is the domestic role. And our ex-girlfriend was a domestic type of person, so she balanced what we were missing. I was the breadwinner, she was the domestic, and he picked shit off of high shelves. I don't know. So there's a sort of, for me, there's a sort of balance in the three, but we just haven't had a successful version of that yet. But I appreciate having a male partner that doesn't fetishize my bisexuality. What's fun about us is that we both turn our heads when we see an attractive woman, and he doesn't get yelled at, because he doesn't have a straight
My
wife.
husband
That's just
loves
like
that too.
It's like it's a part of the bond. It's it's a part of the camaraderie. It's like, he is attractive. He casts a way wider net than I do. I will tell you that. There's times when he'll point out someone and I'm like, her, but like when we do find someone that's attractive to both of us and we both turn our head, then now we have something we get to chat about for a few minutes, and it just it strengthens that thing. So I never have to worry that my husband is with me because of the women that I could bring home or anything like that. Where I won't say that I had partners. I had a kind of a male partner that we sort of messed around for a period of time, and he enjoyed that part. He would be like, oh, go dance up on her, or go do this, or go do that. And I'm like, that's not what we're doing here. So
that's not what.
Yeah, so
what about
his recruiter?
Right, exactly.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So what about in your experience, Jessica, with your husband?
I would say that we have a semi-similar experience. We tried to do triad stuff, and we kind of both figured out that we wanted to live a poly lifestyle. And it's very interesting to me, but he always told me that he wanted to marry a bisexual woman, which is very specific and not very common in men, but not for the reasons you would think. He just really wanted to be with someone, kind of how you were referencing, Sharmane, of like having those shared moments and being comfortable, and then finding balance in our relationship. And we did try the triad thing. And I'll say that I think for us, we decided that after a certain amount of fails, it just wasn't a good fit, because my biggest thing, and him too, is transparency. And we just ran into a lot of people who would say they wanted something and they, either weren't really attracted to him, or because it wasn't a necessity that they were this specific type of person. But like we had someone that was lesbian, and we were fine with that. We just wanted her and my husband to be able to be friends, but she didn't really want a friendship with him. She just wanted a relationship with me. So just things like that. We decided we'd be better if we dated separately. And that's been great for us. I think that we're stronger that way. We support each other as friends in our other relationship, and we support each other in our own relationship as partners. And he's very comfortable with who I am. And he's in no way very feminine or anything, but he's very open to like sharing different roles, whether or not they're gender to be more of his role or mine. And then we try to support each other's outside relationships. So it's been smooth. In the past, when I've tried to date men and I've also come out to them, I either feel like I'm fetishized and kind of used as a recruiter, or they started out that way and then they get scared and they feel threatened and they think that I'm being unfaithful with anybody walking down the street. I can't hang out with my friends. I can't, no matter the gender, there's always insecurity. So I was very happy when I found my husband, and I feel like, there's still bumps in the road with it, but we understand each other's wants. So polyamory for me, I feel like has been a lot more, once we figured out what we wanted, we tried the swinging and everything else. When I figured out I was polyamorous and how I identified as polyamorous, that's been very smooth for me. It's been I'll say that I feel like I have had to work to find more people of color who identify that way, because when I first entered the community, it was a lot of white people, which I don't have an issue with. I'm mixed anyways, but I'm a lot more attracted to women of color. And I'm not interested in, like I said, my 1%'s taken by my husband. I'm not interested in any other men. So
you're like, that quota is filled. Like that quota is filled. So sorry, closed.
I'm with you on that. I find that the introduction to poly, especially white poly, is so drastically different from POC absolutely. Poly.
And that's a whole nother experience to like swim.
It's because the cultural. I mean, because everything has to be situated within which is like the whole reason why, like with Black Radical Queer, where I was like, okay, that's exactly why it is what it is, because our experiences are literally colored by our, us being
by
Black.
Our color.
Right.
And it's a double fetish when you are a Black or woman of color who's also poly in those communities. You're like, well, a unicorn, but you're like the shiniest.
Well, no, it is like a unicorn thing, because when you add in bisexual and then you have people who are like, they're seeking that, then it does become like a unicorn situation where it's like, you're Black, you're poly, you're bi, like, oh my God,
checking off all these boxes.
Right. All this thing. Right, exactly. But then
there's also the thing of like, you're expected as a bisexual to just be attracted to everyone. You can't have nuance in what you're attracted to. So like our ex, she seemed to be more attracted to my husband than me. In the beginning, she was interested in the gayness part, but only publicly, it seemed. She was more excited about the public display of gayness between the two of us. But in private, it was
another thing.
It's a whole other thing.
Like,
it made me feel small in the relationship, because I could tell what she was really there for was my husband, and I was kind of in the way over time. Not initially, but over time, it was clear that in their relationship, I was in the way, and it wasn't an even equilateral triangle situation. But in public, she wanted to display more with me, and that isn't how I live my life. I don't need the public display of gayness or straightness or anything like that.
And I relate to the struggle, but you can't use people for that. Visibility is hard being bisexual, especially femme presenting, but it's a very delicate way that you have to like find some validity, but also not put yourself on, like, you're going to the other extreme when you make yourself a show pony. Like you have to find some type of middle ground.
And then too, that's a little like some exoticism, fetishism type stuff to me too. If it's like, well, I want to be visibly, and I've had that experience before too, of like being with someone who, when we were out and about, she wanted to be, it wasn't just like PDA, like, I was like also the first woman she had ever been with, I'm like, why am I always the first? But anyway, I was the first woman she had
don't get me started.
With. And so she wanted to have that like hyper visibility. And I really just ultimately felt like it was like kind of like a fetishism type of thing. Like, oh, look, I'm with a woman. Oh, look, I'm with a woman. I think it ultimately stopped being about me specifically and me as a person in our relationship, and more so about look at me, like an accessory. Like I became an accessory. And I can't even say it was about visibility of her queerness. I just think it was visibility of, ooh, I'm with the woman. Like, I don't know. It didn't feel the same of like, ooh, I am a queer woman and I need that validation. It literally felt like I am an accessory.
Yeah, the validation is interesting because for me, I can walk down the street, gay or straight, and it does not matter. I am not impacted by someone's view of my gayness or my straightness. I went through a lot of period of time of feeling not gay enough, or and I'm saying the term gay versus queer because I kind of missed that. Like the queerness didn't start being a thing until after I had already kind of come into my own. So I don't have queer as a terminology for me specifically, although I'm trying to learn to adopt it. But from my perspective, I wasn't gay enough or straight enough. And so in gay spaces, I felt weird because I had a husband. I think, Jessica, you were kind of saying a little bit like that. And then in straight spaces, I was entirely straight. Like I didn't have to let people know. I could hide in this kind of straight privilege, and I'm uncomfortable hiding in privilege of any kind, both as a mixed race person and as a person on the gay spectrum. I don't need to be seen all the time, but I need to not be denied when I put it out there. So if I'm mixed race and I say I'm black, I know I look yellow, but I'm black. I was raised black. I'm black. My dad was black. My mom was Asian. I feel I have a hierarchy in terms of how I identify. I identify first as black, and then as Asian, and then as a black mixed Asian.
I understand that.
On the sexuality side, I am just so in the middle. Like, yes, I'm in with a man, and I've been with him for 18 years. He was my best friend for years before we ever got together. We have this very complicated mix of relationship, of friendship and married partners and, poly partners and all this other kind of stuff. We have a lot going on in our relationship, but I don't need to be straight to be with him. I don't need him, and he doesn't need to tell people, oh, this is my straight wife. He doesn't have to necessarily expose me as bisexual, but he's not uncomfortable by me being out or outwardly thing, but he also won't let somebody try to fetishize me. When people do try to be like, oh, dude, you're so lucky, especially when we were with our ex-girlfriend, oh, dude, you're the luckiest dude on earth, he would be like, he would instantly stop them and say, what about them? Why do you think I'm more lucky? Because they get two partners too. And for me, best of both worlds, I get to explore all sides of my sexuality with these two people, and she does as well. And he gets to learn a little bit more about his sexuality through us as well. But for some reason, people always congratulated him and patted him on the back for having the triad, and we were invisible.
Gotta love that patriarchy.
We were a quintessential part of it, and yet invisible as women in that relationship. Yeah,
y'all are like trophy.
And so we made efforts, like to sometimes walk where one of us were in the middle versus him in the middle, so that it didn't necessarily mean he was the center of the relationship, because publicly that seemed to be a very important thing, and it was sort of accidental. It was, we kind of started out that way, and then realized, like, publicly it might not be the best message to put forward when we're all three holding hands as we're walking down the street or something like that. So I think having a straight male partner that is very open-minded and comfortable and not a fetishizer in that respect has been really helpful. But at the same time, I put myself in a gay space and I'm like, ugh, I got this husband here. So,
I can relate to
bag.
that.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag.
I was going to ask, like, I guess for your take, because you're saying you feel similarly in terms of with the visibility when it comes to your husband. So, like, how do you navigate that? Like, when it's you two, or when, like, how do you feel now? Has your visibility evolved or anything like that?
It's kind of tough for me. Sadly, I feel like as much as I've internally evolved about it, externally it hasn't. I definitely feel the privilege of being straight presenting when I'm with my husband. Even if I'm in queer spaces, people assume I'm straight. And I'm aware of that privilege, and it's difficult for me because I feel it's sometimes like I'm, being pushed out of a community that I want the support from. And then when I want to support the community, I don't feel like I'm looked at as a valid supporter. I become an advocate, and I'm not.
Okay.
Right.
Those are my people. So it's been complex. And I feel like it was a very painful thing for me. And I've talked to you about that in the past, Javia, of just dealing with, like, accepting where I'm at and that's how people are going to view me. And I'm trying to find a way to work on my outward identity as a queer bisexual woman, especially in spaces that are queer. I'm not as concerned about the straight spaces, because straight spaces hold all sorts of fun microaggressions and things, and I just deal with them, and it's fine. But I really do feel like I have been looking from the outside in to the queer community, the bisexual community, and not just with romantic relationships, but with friendships. I feel like I'm just now coming into being able to find friends and a community where I can be queer and I can be bisexual, and I don't have to, like, wear, like, a costume for people to notice me. They just accept it as a part of me. And in that same light, until that started happening, I really didn't feel comfortable disclosing to my family. I won't say coming out, and that's how I explained it to them, because I don't feel like that's something I should have to do. But sharing that part of my life has been difficult, because with straight people, I feel like I have to do complicated explanations or people invalidate me. And then in the queer community, I feel like I have to validate myself. And I don't want to get into the habit of becoming someone who has to put it on display, because I don't like when people do that. And I don't want to have to do that to feel like I'm a part. So I haven't resolved that, and I haven't figured it out, but I am slowly finding a little community in my area where I feel safe, and I feel like people don't, whether my husband is with me or not, and it's a very small community, they accept me for who I am, and I don't feel like I need to outwardly present a certain way. But it's complicated. It's still very painful for me.
But I think too, part of the larger issue or larger conversation is that socially, kind of like society has to get away from this idea that you have to present a certain way to be a certain way. I should not have to present a certain way to like validate my queerness. Like I am who I am, and that just is what it is. Like I am a Black queer woman, and it doesn't matter what my physical presentation is. Like it doesn't matter. Like I'm always that person. So I shouldn't have to do these things to kind of like validate that. Where it really, I guess, bothers me is in situations where I feel like it's erasure and it's like me and my partner or something like that. Then that is that assumption that this could not be my significant other. That's really when it bothers me, because I'm like, that's just, it's so ridiculous. It's like that the assumption is that, oh, this person is not, like, there's no way that this could be your significant other. Because like me just moving throughout the world by myself, I understand that I'm going to be assumed to be straight based on my presentation. But I'm like, depending on the space that I'm in, whether I'm straight or not may or may not be your business. Like if I'm at work, I don't find it necessary for me to move through work with my queerness at the forefront. Well, for one, my Blackness is always at the forefront, first and foremost. Like that's just is what it is. I'm a Black woman. Yeah. So as an individual, it depends on the situation. Like I don't have to navigate every space with my queerness at the front. If it's relevant to that space, then I navigate every space with my Blackness at the forefront. So
me too.
That's kind of first layer. And then with my queerness, that may or may not be pertinent. But I don't ever hide it, I guess. Now, and some stuff is a safety thing. Like there have been times where if, someone's kind of asking me about a partner, like I will not specifically acknowledge gender or something like that. I'll try to keep it neutral because I don't know. Like I've dealt with like gay bashing before personally. So it's like I'm very wary of that in terms of like I don't know everybody like that. So I'll just say, oh, my partner or my spouse or I won't, or if someone says like he or him, I won't correct them.
I feel that has a lot more to do with our Blackness than our sexuality in that case. And maybe this is just something that I'm sensitive about as a person of color on the gay spectrum, because I don't think white people deal with this, is like you're saying side by side, you guys do not look even remotely related. You don't look like you would come from the same family. You're not even just in sort of complexion, but facial structure, your whole deal. You are clearly not the same. But I think I feel like because you are both Black women, that they'll be like, well, are there Black lesbians? I feel like white people do this to us. It's like, I don't think there really are that many, or they're just so not public in general and part of our culture that it's just like, yeah, you guys must be related. But I think that we get accused of being related all the time.
Well, there's definitely that element of it, but it does largely come from people of color.
Oh, really?
So because of the spaces, like, I mean, I'm not around a whole lot of white people. So there's that. So a lot of this is like just us in the neighborhood, like at the grocery store and I have talked to like white lesbians who have gotten it too, like white lesbian couples who are like, oh, they're friends. So I think part of it is that, like, part of it when it's coming from like basically a white person, I do feel like part of it is like that microaggression, kind of that kind of thing. But it largely, in our experience, it has largely come from people of color. It's largely come from Black people. So
I feel like that's like that top down, trickle down of systematic racism mixed with religion. Like we are the last to accept ourselves. And then,
well, I think that's part of it. And I also think part of it is definitely patriarchy. Like, I think part of it is that, oh, you're two women, so of course you're a friend. Like, I think it's kind of that, the erasure that comes along with that. So it depends on who it's coming from. Sometimes I do think it is a race thing, like, kind of on that you all look alike type of BS. But then sometimes it is definitely like, you're both women, so of course you're not together like that. Right. So that's more so where I think it comes from more so than race, because it has been from other Black people. I think it's just, oh, well, yeah, of course y'all are like sisters or cousins or whatever. And I think part of it's religion, and I think more largely is culture, because even in a place that like, out here is supposed to be very liberal, blah, 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 we get it out here all the time. Like, it's not like we get it less out here than we did in Georgia. Right. So it kind of crosses that political spectrum too. So I think it is a cultural thing of, oh yeah, I think it's a cultural thing. And it's also a thing of like, women are allowed to be more like outwardly intimate, outwardly affectionate stuff to each other in their friendships, so that it's like, oh, you can be that way with each other and just be friends.
Yeah. There's that other thing too of where it's like, it's okay for you to, like, it's non-threatening for you to have a relationship with a woman. So you're assumed straight, and then you can have your little girlfriends and you can play or whatever. But since penetration, you know,
I'll be like, oh, we know the real deal though.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, that's the thing that frustrates me and will actually turn me against even considering a possible partner if they have that point of view. It's like, sex is sex. It doesn't need to have a penis to penetrate to make it sex.
Right.
But
that's the whole validation thing. You know, that's about needing masculinity, needing maleness, needing a man to validate something. So it's like, if it's not with a man,
blah, blah, blah.
Like, if it's not with a man or it's not in that context, then it's not valid, because even like gay men their relationships are seen as more valid than lesbian women. But that's because it's like, oh, well, you know, a woman can be with a woman and, oh, that's just a phase. Oh, that can be dismissed. But it's like a man, oh, if you're with a man, oh, you really are gay, you know? So it leaves no for nuance on either side. So for men, what if a man is just like, oh, I had this experience. It's like that one experience people can say will define his whole identity, when he could be like, oh, you know what? I tried this, but no, actually, it's not really for me. I am straight. Yeah. And folks are like, oh, no, you've done that. You're not straight. And a woman can be with a woman. They're like, oh, you know, she's just messing around. That's nothing serious.
See, that's what bothers me about the bisexual thing. It's one of the areas in which I think men are at a disadvantage as bisexuals, is that you're seen as, if you can take a dick, you're gay. And if you're a woman, you're experimental, but ultimately you have to end up with a man, because the penis is the center of sexuality. And even as a bisexual female, it took me a while to understand that a man could be a bisexual person as well, because same type of thing. It was that programming in our culture that tells us the penis is so important. So I'm thinking, well, if he's willing to have sex with a man, why would he even want? Yeah, like, why would I want to have sex with a woman? And then here I am, a bisexual person, and this is like teen Sharmane. Like, I am a bisexual person who wants to have sex with men and women, and I'm perfectly comfortable in that desire or in that sexuality, and yet I'm not giving credit to men that are having that same experience. And now as an older, adult, I see the error of my teenage ways, and I feel bad that bisexual men are even probably more invisible than I am, while still dealing with my own invisibility. There are times when I'm in some spaces that I shout it out a little louder, not because I want to be a show pony, but because I'm wanting it to be normal for people. And there's places where I've learned maybe I shouldn't have been more so vocal. A couple times I was out at work as poly and bisexual, and in those spaces, some of it was okay, and in some of it I regretted it, only because
but then you become like that go-to person where people want to ask you all the questions, that's definitely been my experience in kind of like navigate. And that's why as I've gotten older, I've definitely got more selective, and I feel like I've gotten more discernment about like how I navigate different spaces, because when I was younger, I was very like, I'm out, I'm whatever, I'm an open book. And I can still, communicate with people and kind of have that openness, but it's a time and place for everything. And I became that person, like, which actually now I joke about it, and I always put like in my little bios or something, I'll say like your friendly neighborhood lesbian or your favorite lesbian, because I was the go-to lesbian. I was the person that people came to and ask all the questions. And to a certain extent, I didn't mind, but then some stuff would be really invasive. Some stuff would be, of course, riddled with microaggressions and, have all this little underlying stuff. Or, some stuff would be like, oh, well, this is all well and fine until, you find the right man and it's going to change your life. Like, okay.
Right.
I highly, highly, highly doubt that. I mean, I have my exceptions. Okay. But they're still not going to change the game to just make me be like, you know what? I'm so uninterested in women now. Like, that's going to be a no. Yeah.
And that's not to say, not nobody, but most people aren't interrogating straight people this way.
Right.
And that's when you're being inappropriate. Like, what are you asking?
Asking all these questions. So you don't see people going up to like a straight person like, yeah, so
who's your crossover person?
You know what I'm saying? Like, who's the man in the relationship? How do you two do it? Like, are you kidding me?
It's funny because if someone asked that question of me and my husband, it would probably be, in terms of gender stereotypes, I would be the husband and he would be the wife in terms of gender stereotypes. Oh, well, he is completely masculine and I'm whatever I am, the femme middle thing that I am. Like on the outside, just by sitting there talking, we're just a typical straight couple if you look at us and you don't engage. But if you actually get to know us, gender role wise, I would be the husband in our relationship.
But I think too, that's why it's really important that we have a more nuanced view. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do BRQ, because I want for people to have this broader view of what queerness actually is and how it is. It's really not a binary. It is a spectrum. And we can kind of fall anywhere on that spectrum. I mean, like Jessica said, she's 99% lesbian. And me and my best friend, we always joke and say something similar. We used to say we're 95% lesbian. We used to always talk about our 5%, which was like guys that we thought were attractive or whatever. As my politics have shifted and as I've become a lot more radical, I went from 95% to like 99.9999 lesbian, but I can still acknowledge, like me and my wife all the time, we can acknowledge, oh, this guy is attractive. Oh, like this is what it is. And we can, let's talk about it all the time. Like, have you seen Post Bad Bears account? Like, come on now, we're human. Like we're gonna, be like looking at all the pictures and stuff, but there is a spectrum in this room to be accommodating of all those things. Just because, I can say, oh, I'm a lesbian, so that means that I cannot acknowledge, hey, this guy is attractive. Hey, it's a lot more nuanced than people give room for. But I'm like, I'm not going to hold myself to the same binary because I'm going to be my whole, my entire queer self. I'm going to be married to my wife. I'm going to do all that. I'm going to be poly, all that kind of stuff. But I'm also going to, acknowledge if I look at like Trevante Rhodes, who I think is super duper fine, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, I can't acknowledge that he's fine because, I'm a lesbian. Like, what? But that's people's perspective. People's viewpoint is so narrow and it's so based in a binary that it's like, it leaves no room for nuance. Like it doesn't leave room for that nuance that, hey, Jessica can say I'm 99% lesbian and be married to a man and that still be valid. Like her being married to a man does not invalidate her leanings, It's
and I
just
think it creates erasure too, because I was surprised as I got more out in the queer community to run into a lot of gay women who I was interested in, or even dated a woman who was dating other women and she identified as lesbian, who didn't want to engage with me because I had engaged with a penis. Not like currently, but at any point in my life. I remember my female partner said somebody wouldn't date her unless she stopped dating me because I was having sex with men. And it's like the opposite of making the penis powerful in a totally different way of we're not valid. We're not real. We don't really like women if we're doing this and we're impure. And that's it's like a whole nother thing of taking away people's fluidity. Cause it's like, you can't be bisexual or you're dirty. Like you're dirty if you're bisexual. Yeah, you're fetishized on the male side. You're dirty on the female side.
You're tainted.
It also messes.
How dare you do that?
It also messes things up for people who went through their hiding phase. Like, it's probably less common now, but 20 years ago, you didn't just come out. You engaged in heterosexual relationships until you couldn't live with that anymore. And so there are a lot of people, gay people and lesbians, that will say, oh yeah, well, back when I used to date women, or back when I used to date men, and they qualify it by saying, I wasn't there yet. Yeah. So to punish people for it.
20-year marriages and all this kind of stuff with, or folks who have kids and all that kind of stuff from a previous relationship. So it's like, okay, now their orientation is not valid because of it's
or
ridiculous.
You're just fucking everyone and you're having fun and it's okay.
Right.
You don't have to
you shouldn't have to explain yourself. You don't have to valid. But people will look at it like, even I kind of had the reverse situation of, I knew I liked girls. I wasn't sure how I felt about guys. I found guys attractive, but I definitely, I never had any doubt in my mind that I loved women. Like that was never a doubt. Guys were always like, I don't know, So I went through kind of the reverse where people will say, oh, she went through a phase with, oh, I dated guys. I went through that. I had a boyfriend and all that kind of stuff. And once I had a boyfriend, folks were like, oh my God, I thought you were, just throw me away. Girl, you got to throw the whole woman away because she is, now with a guy, even though my feelings toward women had never changed. But apparently that tainted me. At first it was like, oh, you're a gold star. That BS. I hate that. But it was like, oh, now you've been with a guy. Oh, no, you're tainted. And I'm like, I'm not going to be ashamed of my experiences or anything like that. Like, yes, I've been with more than one guy. But that doesn't make me any less queer, any less lesbian. But that's how people view it. Like, oh, you've gone down a notch. Like,
it also takes love out of the equation. Like, if you're holding it against people, like here's the thing is that when I was younger, I was more attracted to women than men. I happened to fall in love with my male best friend, and we've been together 18 years.
Right.
It didn't stop my attraction to women. It didn't stop my predominant attraction to women. I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm on the 99 part. I'm probably more like a 60, 60-40, or something like that. Split. Something like that. Like, I used to think I was kind of 50-50. It really depends. But as I got older and I started to realize that, like, I think, Javier, you're the one who put it this way for me, that I'm more heteromantic and homosexual, because I do tend to think of women more sexually, and men, there's very specific categories of men that I become very sexually attracted to, but mostly I'm really comfortable in my romantic relationship with my husband. But if you're taking someone out, if you're taking away their lesbian card revoked or gay card revoked or whatever the fuck, just because we're with someone of the opposite gender, it's like, look, my sexuality is clear. My romantic side is not as much. Like, it's probably more about the person than the body parts. So if I happen to be, even if I happen to be fully lesbian, I think, like, maybe in Jessica's case, you're saying you're 99% lesbian, but you happen to fall in love with this man, and he satisfies your 1% quota. You're not interested in other men, but if you identify the way that you do, like, your heart dominated that for you, I think. And
and it's like, that's it, to invalidate that is so ridiculous to me. And that's honestly what it was with, like, when I had a boyfriend or whatever. I didn't set out to, let's find a boyfriend. I met him. We clicked. I fell in love with him. And it was just him. It wasn't because he was a man. It was just him as a person. I thought he was just fucking brilliant. He was brilliant. It was his mind. And so I was just like, I didn't care. So I wasn't like, oh, well, he's really cool, but he's a guy. So no, I was just like, he's cool. He happens to be a guy, but whatever, it kind of comes along with the package. That's how I really was like, his maleness kind of came along with the package of that brilliant mind. And I'm like, I was just like, I gotta have him. It was just my mind was so blown by his brilliance. I was like, okay, so yeah, I like him. And even, and I just decided to give it a chance, because prior to that, my experiences, my first love and all that kind of stuff happened women, but I was just like, why not? I like him, so why not? And that was interestingly received. But what I knew was, like, even in my time with him, I very much wanted to be with a woman. So I was like, okay. And that's when I really started to kind of, I didn't know the word poly or anything, but that's when I started to kind of come into the understanding that I was poly, because I was like, oh, I'm very much, like, into him and in love with him and stuff, but I still very much wanted to be with a woman. And I am very kind of woman identified when it comes to I have definitely an affinity toward women. And I knew when I thought about, even in my childhood, like, my life and being a parent and getting married, it was always to a woman. Like, I always envisioned my future with a woman. So still, but I felt like luckily my friends were just like, whatever, you're happy, cool. But just everybody else on the outside looking in, it was a very interesting thing. And so I just think that we have to broaden, like, socially, societally, we definitely need to broaden our view and look at it more as a spectrum than a binary. And know, too, that people do fluctuate, and that, like, folks have every right. I mean, at that point in time in my life, I felt like, ooh, I'm with a guy, so now I have to identify as bisexual, even though that didn't feel right to me. I had a partner who was trans, who transitioned while we were together, and I had always identified as lesbian, and then I felt like, oh, well, this person is transitioning, now I have to, like, change my identity. And it didn't sit right with me. I never, even when I said, oh, I'm bi, I felt like I was supposed to say that, or I felt like that was better than me saying I was lesbian, but I always felt like I was lesbian. Bisexual never fit me for my attraction. My attraction has always leaned extremely heavily toward women, but I just felt like that's what I had to say. But as I've gotten older and everything, I'm like, okay, I understand there's more nuance, and we just need that understanding to happen on a societal level that you can be nuanced. You can be bisexual and be hetero-romantic and homosexual. You can be bisexual and be married to a man and still be predominantly attracted to women. Like there's no cookie cutter way for it to look.
People have to let people identify their labels for themselves. I think we're so caught up in these definitions that we want people to fit into this small box if they say they're something. And if someone tells you they're mixed, queer, poly, gay, you have to ask them what that means to them. People, like you were saying, people change, and it's not fair to box someone in and make them stagnant. Like, let people be who they are and ask them. Don't tell them.
But that's the thing, though. Ask them, because we don't get to tell somebody who they are. And I think that's such a big part, is like everybody else trying to tell us who, and especially we have to keep in mind, I mean, we are Black women. So there are a lot of things that society tries to place on us and tries to tell us we should be. So that's part of it too. It's just like, folks trying to tell us who we are. And I'm like, well, no one can define that but us. Only I can define who I am and all the things that encompasses. So we have to definitely leave room for people to do that. And it would make life a lot easier if people just shut up and let people tell them who they are instead of trying to dictate that.
Or even feeling that they have the right to know.
That entitlement, right. Entitlement though, because it's exactly your business.
It's not relevant to you if you're not trying to date me or have sex with me, just to be honest.
Exactly.
Why do you?
And I mean, people feel so entitled to know things about you. It's really, unless Sharmane decides to disclose XYZ, that's not my bit. What does that have to do with me? Nothing. She can live her Black ass life and do what she want to do.
Amen.
And it has no bearing, but people are so entitled and so wrapped up in it's like they act as if your decisions personally impact them. And I'm like, live your own damn life. You have your own life to live. Why does it matter if Jessica's married to a man and she's more attracted to women? What does that have to do with your life? How is that impacting you in any way? Let her live her damn life. So that's, I mean, but I think too, with the visibility thing, when I was younger, because of that erasure, I felt more of a responsibility to be visible and more of a responsibility to be out and even more flamboyant. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, look, I'm just out here trying to live my life, and I'm going to be just be my authentic self. And I don't have to prove myself to anybody. I don't have to validate it. I don't have to announce it. I'm just going to move through the world as myself. And whatever parts of me are relevant to my engagement with you, that's what you'll get. And so it may or may not include all the things. It usually won't, because that's not relevant to how we engage with people on a regular basis. It's only relevant to people who are closer to us or just depending on our relationship with people. But a coworker or something, you don't need to know all the things about me. What the hell that got to do with us doing our job? Nothing.
Or the lady sitting next to you on a plane or walking down the grocery store.
Yeah, all in your business. So, okay. So we're really the point, and it's something, this whole idea of visibility and everything is something I do want to circle back to later on down the line, but it's something that was very important to me to have a conversation about, because it is, I think it is so important. I think that there's so much erasure, and Black women in particular, I feel like we experience erasure on so many different levels. And so I really think it's important for folks to get an understanding of that and how that occurs specifically with if you're Black and queer and femme, or if you're Black and queer and femme and married to a man, and all those kind of things, how that really manifests, and your stories, your experiences and stuff need to be shared. So that's why I really wanted to be able to have that conversation with both of you. But before we wrap up, because I know that we kind of had our goal in mind in terms of time frame. And I understand too that a lot of times these are very loaded conversations, so they will, run a little long. But was there anything that either of you wanted to add in terms of just this idea of visibility, queerness, Blackness as we're wrapping up?
I guess I just want to say from my own experience, and then as a therapist hearing people's stories, that for anyone listening who's in whatever part of their journey, there's no right way to do things. There's no way you have to be. Just figure it out for yourself, and don't let people tell you who you are. There's no right way to be queer or not queer. You can be gay and not queer. I feel like it took me a long time to find a community of people that supported me. And even if you don't have that community, just stand in who you are and be okay with that. There's so many labels out there, and I think it's important for people to know whether they're starting out and they're young or they're older. I know a lot of people who are older who are just now coming into themselves because they were stumbling through all the things we've discussed, just to not seek out answers in other people's labels. Just look at who you are and find what fits. Start from the inside out. That's really all I think I would add. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm not perfect myself.
Yeah, that I second that. It's pretty much take your time to figure out what your identity is and understand that you're going to change a lot throughout your lifetime, and to not be afraid of it and not to feel that you have to justify it to anybody else. Beyond your partners, I think there's certain amount of clarity that you need to have when you're entering into certain relationships to make sure that you understand kind of where you're at so that you can communicate it properly and have a sort of peaceful relationship, but not allowing other people to label you. And I think going back to what you said, Jessica, the finding a community, even if that community is one person, someone that you can kind of work through your identity questions with is helpful. That gateway person can make a difference to keep you from feeling isolated. I think a lot of our problems do stem from being isolated and not being comfortable talking about it to anybody. But if you can find that person, even if it's an online community thing or whatever, I mean, that's how Javi and I met, is through an online community when I was trying to discover my poly identity. Getting that opened up a lot of doors to what I now think of as my identity that I didn't even have 2 years ago. So try to be comfortable in your skin as much as possible, and when you're not comfortable, that's okay. Work through it. You have time. You're not on any kind of clock that you have to meet. So
Right. I think one of I don't even remember where I got this from, but I think I was watching something or reading something, and it's something I've really adopted as a mantra, that we have an entire lifetime to get this right. You don't have to get it right today or tomorrow or anything like that, but we have time to figure it out. So of course, no one gets to determine who you are but you. So you are the authority. I always say you are the authority of your own identity. Nobody else is the authority on you but you. So and whatever you put out there and whatever you assert as your identity, that should just be accepted. But as my mentor says, it's not now or never. It's now, all or nothing. So that is a process, and you can go through that process as long as it takes. And I do think it's constantly evolving and growing. I know 30-year-old Javia is not the same as 20-year-old Javia. I'm just not. I'm grateful for that. I don't want to be the same, but my identities and all those kind of things have evolved and have expanded as I grow more and learn more. So I think that we all, that's just all a part of our journey in life, is to be able to kind of go through the world and figure out what fits for us, what doesn't fit, what that means for us. And we really get to cultivate this very unique, personal, individual, customized definition of ourselves that no one else can write for us. That's totally up to us. And so I think that's very empowering to be able to do that. I think that's just a part of our kind of purpose in the grand scheme of things, is we get to figure it out for ourselves. No one else can tell us. Black Radical Queer is a ManeHustle Media podcast hosted by Javi and Nicole and produced and edited by Sharmane Johnson. Music is by Young Carts. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Black Rad Queer. That's BLKRADQWR. And you can also listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to stay connected to us in our discussion group. It's called the BRQ Discussion Group on Facebook, where we will continue the conversations that we start in the podcast.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.